Why money growth feels slow until it isn't. At some point, almost everyone asks the same quiet question. Why does money growth feel so slow? Even when I'm doing the right things. You work, you save what you can. Maybe you invest a little. Maybe you try to improve your career. On the surface, you're moving forward, but emotionally, it feels like nothing is happening. Your income rises slightly, then expenses rise with it. Your investments grow, but not enough to change your life. Every month feels like effort with very little visible reward. And that's when doubt creeps in. Am I too late? Am I doing this wrong? Is financial freedom only for other people? What most people don't realize is that money growth doesn't move the way we expect it to. It doesn't feel fair, it doesn't feel linear, and it almost never feels fast until suddenly it does. Today we're talking about why money growth feels slow until it isn't. And why understanding this can change how you approach your finances, career, and long-term decisions. This topic matters because frustration is one of the biggest reasons people abandon good financial habits too early. Across the US and the UK, many people are doing what they believe is right. They work consistently, try to save, contribute to retirement accounts, and think about investing or career growth. On paper, things look responsible. In real life, it often feels underwhelming. For a long time, progress feels almost invisible. A raise barely changes your lifestyle. Savings grow, but not enough to feel secure. Investments move up and down without any clear sense of momentum. At the same time, inflation quietly erodes purchasing power. Rent, groceries, energy, transport, and insurance take up more space in your budget each year. Even when your income increases, your breathing room doesn't. This creates a subtle but dangerous mental shift. People start to feel like they're doing a lot and getting very little back. They begin questioning whether saving is even worth it, whether investing actually works for ordinary people, or whether career growth has already peaked. The feeling isn't panic, it's quiet disappointment. The real issue isn't that money growth is broken. It's that early-stage growth doesn't feel like growth. The effort is immediate, but the reward is delayed. And humans are not naturally patient with delayed feedback. When results don't show up quickly, motivation fades, even if the strategy is sound. The core problem is this mismatch between expectation and reality. Most people expect progress to be noticeable early on. But with money, the early years are often the slowest and least rewarding emotionally. Without understanding that, it's easy to assume you're doing something wrong, when in fact, you may be closer to real momentum than you realize. Money growth feels slow not because the system is broken, but because it operates in ways that clash with how humans naturally think. One of the biggest root causes is our tendency to expect linear results. We're used to trading time for money. Work an hour, get paid an hour. That logic conditions us to believe progress should show up quickly and predictably. When it doesn't, frustration sets in. Another major cause is scale. Early on, the numbers are simply too small to feel meaningful. A solid percentage return on a modest investment doesn't change your daily life. Saving a few $100s a month is financially responsible, but emotionally unexciting. The math is working, but the impact is quiet. People mistake this silence for failure. There's also a psychological bias toward immediate gratification. Spending delivers instant feedback. Growth does not. You feel the sacrifice of saving or investing right now, but the benefit exists in the future. That time gap makes progress feel slower than it actually is, especially in the early stages. Social comparison makes this worse. We're constantly exposed to stories of sudden success, big wins, fast exits, overnight breakthroughs. What we don't see are the long, uneventful years that came first. This distorts expectations and makes normal progress feel inadequate. Finally, inflation and rising costs mask gains. Even when income or investments increase, higher living expenses absorb the difference. This doesn't mean growth isn't happening, it means it's being offset. Without understanding this dynamic, people assume their efforts are pointless and lose patience just as compounding begins to take hold. Once you understand why money growth feels slow, the next step is changing how you relate to that slowness. Not by ignoring it, and not by chasing faster results, but by reframing what progress actually looks like in the early and middle stages. The first shift is moving from outcome-focused thinking to process-focused thinking. Instead of constantly asking, "Is this working yet?" the more useful question becomes, "Am I building a system that works over time?" Systems compound even when results are small. Habits don't need to feel rewarding to be effective, they need to be consistent. This applies directly to saving and investing. Early contributions matter less for their size and more for what they establish: participation. When you invest regularly, you're not just chasing returns, you're training yourself to stay in the market through boredom, uncertainty, and slow periods. That ability is what separates people who benefit from compounding from those who exit too early. Career growth works the same way. Skills compound before income does. Learning, taking on responsibility, and building credibility often feel invisible at first. The financial reward comes later, sometimes years later, but only if the groundwork was laid consistently. Waiting until growth feels exciting usually means waiting too long. Another key shift is accepting that progress won't feel motivating most of the time. Motivation is unreliable, structure is not. Automating savings, investing regularly, and committing to skill development remove emotion from the equation. When emotion is minimized, patience becomes easier. Money growth accelerates quietly. The practical goal isn't to feel rich early, it's to stay in the game long enough for momentum to appear. And that requires trusting a process that feels slow, boring, and often unrewarding at first. The reason money growth feels slow for so long is because the real benefits show up on a different timeline than most people expect. In the short term, progress is almost invisible. In the long term, it can feel disproportionate, and that gap is where patience either pays off or breaks down completely. When you stay consistent for years, something shifts. Your savings stop feeling fragile. Your investments start generating noticeable returns. Your career experience compounds into leverage rather than just effort. The same actions that once felt pointless suddenly begin to matter. Not because you changed strategies, but because time finally had enough room to work. This is where many people misunderstand financial freedom. They imagine it as a sudden event, a big win, a perfect investment, a breakthrough year. In reality, it's usually the result of long stretches of boring consistency followed by a phase of acceleration. The acceleration feels surprising only because the groundwork was quiet. If you don't apply this long-term view, the consequences are subtle but serious. You're more likely to quit early, take unnecessary risks, or constantly reset your strategy. Each reset restarts the clock. Each impatience-driven decision pushes real progress further away. On the other hand, when you accept that money growth is uneven, something changes emotionally. You stop measuring success month to month. You focus more on durability than speed. That mindset creates resilience, financially and psychologically. Over time, this leads to real choice. The ability to say no to bad opportunities. The flexibility to slow down or pivot. The confidence that comes from knowing your progress is compounding, even when it doesn't feel dramatic. That's the part most people never reach, not because it's unreachable, but because they underestimate how long the slow phase lasts. Money growth doesn't feel fair while it's happening, but for those who stay consistent long enough, it eventually becomes undeniable. When you look at the full picture, one truth becomes hard to ignore. Money growth rarely feels satisfying while it's being built. It feels slow, uneven, and often disappointing, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the process doesn't reward patience emotionally in the early years. It rewards it mathematically, much later. Most people don't fall behind because they never start. They fall behind because they stop believing during the quiet phase. They expect progress to feel like progress. And when it doesn't, they assume something is broken. They change strategies too often, chase faster results, or disengage completely. Each time that happens, the clock resets. Understanding that money growth is slow until it suddenly isn't changes how you behave. You stop needing constant validation. You stop comparing your early chapter to someone else's later one. You begin to see boredom, repetition, and consistency not as flaws in the system, but as signs that the system is working. This isn't about blind optimism. It's about realistic expectations, real wealth, real stability, And real financial freedom are built through long periods of unremarkable behavior. Saving when it feels pointless. Investing when returns look small. Improving skills before anyone notices. These actions don't feel powerful in isolation. But together, over time, they change the trajectory of your life. So here's the question worth sitting with. Are you judging your progress too early? And if you knew that the slow phase is normal, would you stay consistent a little longer instead of looking for something new? I'd like to hear your thoughts. What part of your financial journey feels the slowest right now? Saving, investing, or career growth? And what do you think would change if you stopped expecting immediate proof and focused on staying in the game?